Okay. Okay, so here we are going to go ahead and get started because I'm sure people are going to join us. I know that other people. So what I would normally do, except everybody's got their cameras off, I would love.
You can ask everybody to turn them on, even if it's just briefly for introductions.
But like I know that like Kim is, they're like in babies' rooms. I know this crowd. So anyway, I want to welcome everybody to our Mom's Night In. And we have lots of things planned for this fall. I'm so glad that Marcia is helping us kick it off. And I'm going to let her introduce. I've worked with Marcia for quite a while. And what I will tell you, one of the things that I really like about Marcia is somebody who used to be an advocate myself, is she's very calm. And
unless you ask my children.
And but I don't have to ask them. They're not going to act like that. So, but there's a lot to be said for the advocate that goes in. I'm certainly, and Marcia and I have had this conversation, I'm generally in full support. If you need a bulldog advocate to go in with you, I am a firm believer in getting what you need. But if you want somebody to be logical and just calm in the room, and that's really all you need, then I think Marcia's one of the best. So we are so happy that you're here this evening, and we really appreciate it. For those of y'all that don't know me, I'm Cheryl Arno, and I'm the Executive Director of the Down Syndrome Association of Atlanta. And again, we're so happy that y'all are here tonight. We are recording this, so if anybody has a problem, please let me know. But we want to make sure that we can get it out there once for the people that aren't able to make it this evening. And thank y'all for signing up as in our new way of doing things, that y'all signed up and got the link and all of that immediately, instead of me having to go back and scroll through my emails trying to find out who was on the list. And so I appreciate our new way of doing things. As always, if y'all have any questions for me, certainly don't hesitate to ask. Marcia, why don't you go ahead and tell them about yourself for just a minute. I want to give, before I make you the host as well, because I can't remain host if you're a host, right?
You can make me a co-host.
I can?
Yes.
It doesn't say that, it just says make host.
Well, okay then.
Because I want to be able to, so you don't have to pay attention to who's coming in, because once I do that, I lose that. So what we can go ahead and start with is if, actually, I think we will go around the group, and then we'll let you speak if that's okay. Nadia, you're the person next to me.
I'm up. Hi, I'm Nadia Papani, and my son Ivan is about to turn 8 years old, which I cannot believe.
I can't even, wow.
I know, so big.
Okay, Juliana, are you putting a baby down? Oh, you're on mute.
Can't even see my mouth talking. Yeah, trying to put my almost 2-year-old down. My name is Juliana, and I have Diego, who is going to be 2 in September.
And Kim, I know that you're putting Max to sleep. So that's Kim Knight. Everybody knows who Kim Knight is, right? Kim, do you want to say, well, if you do, just put in the chat. Andy.
I'm Andy Fox, and I have my daughter Esther, and she just turned 7 and will be in 1st grade.
Okay. Ashley.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm Ashley Stavropoulos, and I have Hadley. She'll be 8 in October.
Okay. Who else am I missing? Daisy.
I am Daisy Weeks Morisco. I have my son Connor, and he will be 6 in October.
And I think Bernadette's the last one I have.
Hi, I'm Bernadette, and my daughter is 11, so I'm the oldest in the group.
Wow, oldest with children. Stephanie, I almost forgot you.
You're on mute.
Am I still on mute?
Can't hear you. Oh, your microphone isn't working. So this is Stephanie. How old is Blake? 8. Max.
And
Can
Max
I was
is
Max.
8. Okay.
Everybody. Max is 8. And hi, Stephanie, traveler extraordinaire. So, okay. So Marcia, you go ahead and start, and then when you're done, we will.
Okay, so hi everyone, it's lovely to meet you. My name is Marcia Lindner, and as Cheryl said, I am an advocate for special needs across the board. I've worked certainly with clients who have come to me from the Down Syndrome Association, as well as clients whose children have Down syndrome from other places. I've worked with children with cognitive impairments, ADHD, specific learning disabilities, kind of a lot of different gamuts. And transition and GAA are growing areas for me. I actually appreciated Cheryl asking me to put this together because I got to do some work and research and pull some pieces together that I have been needing to look at and focus in for a while. So I'm going to tweak what I thought I was going to talk about a little bit tonight. Because of the age of your children, I want this to be helpful for you, but I also want to give you a glimpse of what's coming down the line, because you can never start planning too early. That is my motto. Just a little bit about me. Education wise, I have a master's degree in social work. I have a teaching certificate from Teachers College in New York City. I have a master's degree in Jewish studies. I have been a social worker. I have been a religious school education director. I have been a special education advocate, and I have 2 children grown. One is in college and one is about to enter his senior year at Dunwoody High School, who have special needs in various ways. My daughter is as I say, my ADHD anxiety child, and my son is my, dyslexia language processing sensory kid. And so I've been through this process. I've been through the process of transition with him. And I think that it's important to start it early and to start thinking about it ahead of time. And some of it starts with where your kids are and what is happening with them in elementary school, and how things are set up for them as they transition to middle school, and what vision you are putting out there for your children of where you want them to be when they finish their public school education. So I think that, Cheryl, that's probably a good place to start.
Sounds good to me. Okay. Now I'm going to do my best. Oops. See. And wait. I'm coming. Okay. Make host. You are host.
I am host.
Your host. So just know that people might pop up.
Okay, I will try to take care of that. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So I always like to give a cute little title. My title tonight is the GAA 2.0 and transition planning, or in other words, how to get your student ready for what comes next. We're going to start off talking about the GAA. So we're going to start off talking about the GAA. What is it? How does it differ from what came before, what was called the GAA? How is the GAA 2.0 administered? Who takes it? Who should be taking it? Who shouldn't be taking it? And what does that mean in terms of the diploma that your child will receive when they finish their high school career? Then we're going to transition to transition planning, what it should be, how goals should be determined, what IDEA actually says about transition services, and tips for successful IEP transition planning. So what is the GAA? The GAA is an alternative assessment for children who have a significant cognitive disability, significant to the point that they are unable to take a milestone test, even without a full bevy of accommodations. It was put into place because the federal government came into Georgia and said to them that the GAA 1.0 version was not satisfying the requirement of being able to track what our children were actually learning, and that in terms of what our special needs kids who can't take the milestone are learning in relationship to what the general education grade level standards are. So the GAA 2.0, right, is aligned with grade level standards, but those standards are reduced in the depth, the breadth, and the complexity from what a general education student might be learning. Oh, it's not going to let me go from page to page. Let's see if I can get it to do it down here. Oh, there we go. The GAA was designed with educators who were in the classroom and special education teachers and general education teachers in a way to attempt in a systemic format for students to be able to demonstrate what they know and what skills they have that are on the same level as all of their classmates. So I'll give you an example. Let's say third grade math students are learning multiplication, right? And they're learning 3 times 2, and that might be a test on the milestone exam. On a GAA exam, they might have a picture of 2 cookies on 3 plates each. And the teacher might explain to them that multiplication is a way of adding 2 cookies on one plate plus 2 cookies on another plate plus 2 cookies on a third plate. And they may actually write 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 3 times 2, right? So they're what's the word I'm looking for? They are structuring, right, what they're going to be able to ask the students to do. And they then can even back off, and students can use manipulatives. They can use this, all of the same supports that they use in the classroom on general learning, they can use when they take the GAA. So how did the GAA 1.0 and the GAA 2.0 differ, right? The GAA 1.0, which was in existence until 2018, that was the year that we transitioned to the GAA 2.0, was portfolio based. And basically the teachers would go in and pick the best example of what your child did over the course of the year during certain reference periods. So they might have had one reference period of, mid-September to the first week in November, and then another reference period during February and March, and a third reference period late April and early May, right? And those portfolio items would be used to determine your students' progress. But it really didn't indicate your students' achievement ability, because it was one piece of work. It was at the teacher's discretion what they chose to use, and there was no reporting of how much support a student needed to complete that work.
Marcia, I'm so sorry. I just saw a question from Kim, and I know that she certainly can't speak up right now.
Yeah.
That is the GAA still a portfolio? I don't know what that means. And how does the GAA differentiate between sorry. Now she's continuing the chat. She said that you answered it.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. I
Okay.
can't see all of that while I
Right.
have this up, so I appreciate your jumping in. So the GAA 2.0 is really a standardized assessment, but it has multiple access points for students. So it may be, it's sort of, you can think of it being on a continuum, is they start with a really simple concept, and then they move to more and more complex concepts or breadth and depth of knowledge. So for a student who might be profoundly impaired, they may be all the way at the far end, the easiest, least complicated. And some of our students may be moving in some subjects, they may even meet where their gen ed peers are, or they may be somewhere on the continuum. So the GAA asks a question, and then they ask a more in-depth question, and then they have an even third level if your student is able to respond and is responding appropriately. So the GAA focused on students' progress. The GAA 2.0 focuses on identifying student achievement. And that's really important in terms of IEP planning, knowing where your student is and knowing where your student, what concepts your student is getting based on the grade level content. So I've already talked a little bit about how the GAA is administered and what the multiple access points are. So the GAA is a basic text, and simplified graphics are used in a booklet, but the pages can come out so that students are shown a half a page, 1 page at a time to understand the test material. It is individually based. It is given on a one-to-one basis. It's not given to the whole class at the same time. The teachers are working individually with the students to take the test. It's customizable if a student needs a break, if they've shut down, if they've stopped answering questions, if they need to only be tested in the morning, if they can only do 20 minutes. There's a really wide window of how long the GAA has to be given. If a student doesn't provide the right answer after the introduction to the problem is done, every problem has an introduction, a story basically, that the teachers are telling to remind them of what the concept was. If they don't provide the correct answer, the examiners are directed to give the students a second opportunity. This is actually scripted in the testing booklet for the teacher. And additional support is actually even given to the student to try to help them demonstrate what knowledge they have. As I mentioned earlier, students can use manipulatives, the same things they use in the classroom. If they use an ACC device to speak, or they have some other assisted technology, that is also, all of that is acceptable, where some of those things may not be able to be used on a milestone test. Those are all acceptable in the parameters of the GAA. And as I said, scenarios or passages are introduced for each task to try to engage the student, to make sure they understand what's being asked of them, and to activate the background knowledge.
Question from Kim.
Yes.
Is the GAA written by educators or like Milestones and the big book companies?
So it was written by, my understanding is it was written by educators in the state of Georgia, a combination of special ed teachers and general ed teachers. Special ed teachers who know what they're actually teaching in the classroom, and gen ed teachers who know the grade level standards. Did I answer that question?
She said, thanks.
Yep. So we've talked about multiple access points, meaning that, you know, there's this continuum. So basically you can think of it that there is a lot of scaffolding that happens for students that are built into the GAA process, right? That we want this, the students to be able to show the level of complexity that they can demonstrate. So if they answer the question correctly, they're going to, still addressing the same standard, they're going to move to the next step, which is a little bit more complex and complicated. If the student doesn't answer the question, right, doesn't respond, additional scaffolding will be provided. And if the student still doesn't respond, then that question won't be answered and they will move on with no penalty. So who takes the GAA? So before I get into the grades at when the GAA is taken, it is determined in an IEP meeting if a student is eligible to take the GAA. You're going to hear me wrestling some notes because I don't have all of this memorized, and I want to make sure I'm giving you the correct information. So the GAA is given when a IEP team determines that the student is unable to take the milestone testing, even with all of the accommodations that can be provided, that they have a significant intellectual disability. And I think there's one other thing. I blocked it out. And the IEP team determines that the GAA is the only way to identify the achievement of that student. The concept behind the GAA is that this is not a tool that is going to be used for all students who are special education students. So if your child is able to show to demonstrate the ability to sit for the milestone, even if they don't necessarily do very well on it, I will encourage you, will encourage you, and I'll tell you why when we start talking about diplomas, to keep your child on a Georgia milestone track.
Marcia.
Yes.
Question, sorry.
That's okay.
they declined the milestones testing. Nadia did. And why would they take GAA? Her
So
son
there-
is terrible
there's-
at testing
right.
ADHD and nonverbal.
So there is, I would say that there is no reason in elementary school to consider taking the GAA if you would be opting out of the milestone as well. It's not going to have any impact on your child, and will not make any difference into grade promotion or not. Once you get into middle school, and in particular 8th grade, it will make a difference regarding diploma. And I'll get there when I get to diploma in a minute, okay? You guys with me? All right. So you have decided that you want your child to take the GAA. One of the things that is good about the GAA, as is also true about the milestone, is while it is not the only way to measure achievement, it is one piece of data that you have, particularly if your child is not making progress, to hold the school's feet to the fire, to say the interventions that you are providing are not sufficient because my child is not showing growth. Can you do that with other things? Yes, but the schools put a lot of weight into these testing, into the MAP testing, the STAR testing, the milestone testing. So if you have a kid who isn't overly sensitive to the fact that they have to test, or it doesn't grow anxious, you may want to consider doing that as a piece of your data to be able to make your case that you want a different type of intervention done for your child. So your IEP team has decided with you that your child will not be, is not a student who is appropriate to take the milestone, that their needs, their cognitive needs don't meet that threshold. When will your child take it? Your child would take the GAA in kindergarten, 3rd through 5th grade, and so let me say this again. They'll take English, kindergarten, 3rd through 5th grade, all 3 years of middle school, and 11th grade. The same with math. In 8th grade and 11th grade, social studies is added into the GAA. And in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade, science is added into the GAA. All right, so what is all this GAA stuff? Why is it important? So if your child is not taking, if your child is in a special education classroom, excuse me, should have gotten some water. If your child is in a special education classroom and is having alternative curriculum that is based on the Georgia grade level standards, but is not the same breadth and depth and complexity, then your child is eligible for the GAA. And if they do take the GAA in middle school, in particular 8th grade, and in high school in 11th grade, they will be eligible for a state-defined alternative diploma.
Marcia,
I want you, yep, it's really important. Let me get this out and then I'll answer the next question. It is really important for you to recognize that the state-defined alternative diploma is not a certified high school diploma. It is not the diploma that your child is going to take and tell an employer that they have graduated from high school. Or, well, they can say they graduated from high school. They can't say that they have a high school diploma. It is not the diploma that's going to get them into a technical college, a 2-year college, or a 4-year college. It is a diploma that will allow them to access the college programs for intellectual disability children. There was a question.
So, and I'm not sure where Kim asked this, but she said, so there's no other formal testing other years?
No. So first grade, second grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade, and if your child continues on to age 22, there's no other testing.
So teachers are held to what standard is what she asked?
So that's where your transition planning and your IEP become very important, right? The alternative for this, right, is that, well, there are several different alternatives, right? The other alternative is that your child receives a special education diploma, which says that they completed courses, but they didn't meet the rigor of the state-defined alternative diploma. And I'm going to go over what those requirements are for you in a minute, but they are taking the GAA at the very least in 8th grade and 11th grade, and completing the units, the classes that they, and the variety of classes as set forth by the state board. So if your child stays in school and completes their IEP goals, but doesn't, and reaches age 22, but doesn't meet the requirements for the alternative diploma, they will get a special education diploma. If your child leaves school before the age of 22 and has not met their IEP goals, they get a certificate of attendance. In order for a child who is entering high school, which is all of your children after the year 2020, and the only way to earn a Georgia certified high school diploma is for your child to take the milestones, which are called end of course test, ECOT, end of course, yes, EOCT, sorry. During their high school years, I didn't look these up, so you guys are stretching my memory here. 9th grade algebra, 9th grade biology. Oh, no, it's not 9th grade algebra. It's 9th grade biology, 11th grade American Lit, 11th grade algebra, and there's one other. A student would need to take those courses. They could be a small group class, it could be a co-taught class, it can be a class with a lot of support, but they do have to take the end of course test and they have to pass it with a 70. If not, they have to take the course again. So this is a way that the idea behind the GAA was to recognize that there are some children for whom a high school general diploma is out of their grasp, but this was intended to hold teachers' feet to the fire in terms of making sure that our cognitively impaired students are still exposed to all of the grade level standards.
So just taking the GAA gives you the diploma versus certificate of attendance.
Correct.
If you decline milestones or GAA,
If you decline the milestones in elementary school, there's no impact. If you decline the milestones for 6th and 7th grade, from what I have been told, there is no impact on diploma. If you refuse the GAA for 8th grade and 11th grade, you will not receive the state-defined alternative diploma,
no matter the score.
no matter the score.
I do just want to say really quickly, and this is not but we were having the same issues with diplomas in the last go round of diplomas. And that's exactly why the inclusive post-secondary programs got started, was specifically for those students that could not typically matriculate.
Correct.
And that's why we didn't care what diplomas anybody had, as long as they had all the other requirements. But I just want to say that so the inclusive post-secondary options, regardless, are still options for you.
Correct. Correct. So I referred to the state, Georgia State Board rules, right? In addition to taking the GAA, which is number 2. Number 1, they have to complete an integrated curriculum based on the Georgia standards of excellence that includes instruction in math, English language arts, social studies, science, as well as career preparation, self-determination, independent living, and personal care to equal a minimum of 23 units of instruction. Just so you will be aware, Gen Ed students have to complete 24 units of instruction. They have to participate in the GAA during middle school and high school. And when I say middle school, I really mean 8th grade. They really want to see that the science and the social studies before you head into high school. And this is the other piece. In their later years, meaning 18, 19, 20, 21, they want to see that they have transitioned to an employment, education, training setting that supports, in which the supports needed are provided by an entity other than the local school system. So a vocation rehab program. There are a tremendous number of them out there. There are lots of people who can help you figure out who you want the team inviting to transition meetings to help you get to this place by the time your child has finished what is typically a 4-year high school experience. So I'm going to stop for a minute. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and give you guys a chance to ask GAA questions before I transition on to transition.
Hi, I guess I'll start. So GAA was already brought up for us, and the way that you explained it is so much different than the way that I thought about it. There's so many more positives to the way that you explained it. So my question to you, my son will be in 2nd grade next year, 3rd grade the year after that. He's about 40% Gen Ed, 60% MID. Will there be a benefit for us to agree to GAA to make the Gen Ed portion of his day easier on him? Because they basically explained it that if he does GAA, they can make modifications to his work, which I requested, which they should be able to do without GAA. So I'm a little unclear what the benefit of GAA will be before 8th grade.
So let me ask you a question. Your child is MOID or MID?
MID.
I would be pushing for your child to continue to be taking either the milestones and pushing them to the word is not modify. I just heard this the other day. I'm trying to think of what the key word is that the schools are using. You don't want them to modify the curriculum. You want them to accommodate the workload.
Correct. So that's where the stickiness comes in, right? What's accommodation for me is not for them. And I don't know how to navigate that. Okay, so you're basically saying there should be no reason to do that.
My concern, right, about a child taking it, is your child taking academic classes in, or are they only like the
No.
specials and that
Yeah,
kind of stuff?
yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a different scenario. I'm glad I asked. If your child is not taking any academic classes in the gen ed setting.
So science and social studies, that's kind of a.
Yeah, because it's so hands-on at that age.
Right.
But I would imagine, so I'm going to start off with, what do you imagine for your son down the line?
So here's where my biggest thing comes in. He is so capable. They're not seeing it because he's nonverbal. And I still feel like they're not giving him the right accommodations to see what he really knows. So when I show them how to present the work for him, they call it an accommodation. They call it the modification, and they're not allowed to do that. So there's that part of things. He's not good at test taking because he has ADHD and autism, and obviously nonverbal. So I think that complicates the whole situation a little bit for me.
So it sounds like unless they do what's called modification, which it sounds like what you're asking, your child isn't going to get exposed to what your child needs to get exposed to, in which case I would be looking at doing the GAA.
Just to get him that gen ed time without having
Absolutely.
to.
Absolutely.
Just deny the milestones.
You won't have to deny the milestones if you agree to the GAA.
Okay, but do you have to agree to one of those two?
No, in fact, you don't have, you can say, you can have the IEP team determine that he is a student who is eligible to take the GAA, and then write the same letter that you write for the milestones saying my child is not going to participate in the GAA testing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Marcia and Nadia, you might want to add in your conversation that we live in Cobb County, and Cobb County likes to believe that if we are on a GAA, you are in a self-contained classroom.
Okay. So does that change anything?
How do you combat that, Marcia?
It shouldn't change it in terms of social studies and science, because there is no social studies and science test on the GAA in elementary school.
Stop it.
So there's no reason that they should not be able to accommodate the material across the board.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, be prepared on that one, Nadia. That sounds like that's gonna be a fight.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
Cobb County, how I love you.
Oh, don't we all?
So do we.
All right, anybody else have a specific question or a general question?
In general, Marcia, this is Kim. In general, in your opinion, and in your experience, unless the child is truly just absolutely, you can see they're struggling, right? Like I get that. Not is putting somebody on a GAA, at least in my experience and how I view it. So I'm learning a lot from you right now. By putting a kid on a GAA, at least specifically here in Cobb County, to me, it hinders the amount of growth that they could make. Does that make sense?
Yes, my preference would always be to say my child is not going to take the GAA and to refuse the milestones and to try everything that you can, particularly in elementary school, to keep your child, if your child behaviorally and academically can handle it, in in an inclusive environment as much as possible.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Right? There are some children for whom a co-taught classroom or even a small group classroom that is moving at the fast pace that general ed classrooms move at, that is too much for them. There are children who the combination of nonverbal and the intellectual disability and whatever other alphabet soup is a part of their profile, that may, as much as we want to have our kids in an inclusive environment as much as possible, it may hinder their learning, that they just need to be in a smaller group setting for the academic parts of their day. It's not ideal, but for some of our kiddos, they need that smaller environment. But if your kid can handle it, I would do, particularly in elementary school, everything that you can do. If you disagree with, again, if it's going to keep them from accommodating the learning, right, to giving less work, but still covering, right? So the difference between a self-contained classroom and a gen ed classroom, right, is a gen ed classroom, when they alter the workload, they are still teaching the depth and the breadth of the material and the complexity of the material. They may ask your child to do less, they may slow it down, they may break it down in a different way, but they still have the material in a gen ed classroom that they're required to teach. When your child goes into a small group self-contained classroom, they have the same standards, but they are teaching it on a much different plane, right? And that's where they're really modifying the material. So you have, as a parent, have to make a decision based on the information that you're getting from the school, from tutors, if you have your kids working with tutors, or what you're observing at home, the behaviors that you are or are not seeing. You have to make a determination of what is the cost of pushing for that inclusivity, right?
So here's another question. Have you, in your experience, seen a child on a GAA in a co-taught class?
Never.
Is there a reason for that? Because schools won't adapt, or because it's inappropriate?
Because it's inappropriate. If your child is impaired intellectually enough that they need to have the curriculum modified, so much so that even with all of the curriculum accommodations that they can do in a resource room setting, a small group setting that's doing the full curriculum, or a co-taught setting, then it is appropriate for your child to be taking the GAA, and your child not being in academically challenging classes where the material is over their heads.
Great explanation. Thank you.
So I have a question for you just about what you just said. So I've looked at the standards because I've questioned them on the standards. And let's take science and social studies for an example. There are 3 levels. So usually one is, can he identify? Level 2 is, can he separate what was good trades and bad trades? And then third is, can you explain the differences? Well, my son's nonverbal, so to explain the differences are hard for him. So in a lot of times he he can do 2 out of the 3, but because he cannot do 3, he gets non-satisfactory because he couldn't do all 3. And that's where the modification, I just don't know.
Does he use an AAC or anything like that?
We're in the process of getting that. We're in the process of getting that. We had it at one point. It just wasn't working for him at that point. He was 4.
My answer to the school system would be, you can't make a determination that he is unable to do it because you haven't provided him with the training and the technology to be able to communicate.
Right. You mentioned something earlier, and sorry, it lost my mind now for a second. So you were saying that they just can lessen the questions.
They can reduce the number of questions. They can require a less in-depth answer. There are ways that they can modify the material and still meet the standards of the gen ed classroom.
Okay, yeah, they told me they cannot lessen the amount of questions. They cannot change that at all. It has to be the same as all the other gen ed students.
Yeah, that's not true.
Okay, thank you.
I have lots of students in Cobb County who have reduction of the number of problems that they have to do because of less pervasive issues. Not that I try not to have a hierarchy of disabilities, but I got plenty of kids with just ADHD or anxiety or dyslexia who are covering the same standards, but if there's 4 problems on each standard, they may only be doing 1.
We have a question from Stephanie, whose mic isn't working. Does the student have to pass the milestone? Does the student have to pass the milestones, or do they just have to be able to sit for them? And
they just have to be able to sit for them until high school.
Does that answer it, Stephanie?
But you can also deny taking them, right? You can decline.
Correct. Until high school. Everything changes in high school. Those EOs, those end of course tests, those 4 tests that are required by the state of Georgia, that's 20% of your child's grade, and they have to pass them.
So here's a question for you, because we're talking about this. So they suggested my son take the GAA. If he does that, will that give them a leg up to push him full-time into special ed, small group?
Yes, they will push you in that direction. It doesn't mean they will be successful, but they will push in that direction.
Okay, thanks. And now I'll be done. Thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. All right. Are you ready for me to go into transition a little bit?
No, Marcia, I have a question. This is Bernadette Lewis.
Hey, Bernadette.
Hey, okay.
Your child's 11, middle school yet, or still elementary?
No, she goes to middle school this fall. She's going in this fall. And my question is, she's doing the GAA, and I'm curious, as in how is it scored? And the reason why I'm asking is because they're telling me she's doing well on the GAA, but yet, we know she's not going to do well on GMAS. So at what point do I say, you know what, let's move off of GAA and let's go with the milestones?
So generally speaking, most students do not, once a decision is made for the GAA, unless something is really triggering you, most students who are found eligible for a GAA don't usually move off of a GAA.
Okay, because I'm at the moment she is MID, and we are thinking about moving her over to IRR, interrelated.
If you move her over to IRR, then I think that you could make a case to say, we want her on a regular diploma track and we want her no longer being asked to take the GAA.
And would she be penalized for not passing? You know, my fear is, and I know that she's really not capable of passing the GMAS, but yet we're finding that the GAA and, you know, being self-contained in an MID is not, what's the word? It's not up to par. You know, she's higher than, and I don't want to say that either.
Right. So here's my answer in a nutshell, right? Chances are that her not passing the milestones until high school will have no impact on her educationally. It is an IEP team decision when a student does not pass the milestones. It is the IEP team's ability to decide whether that child is promoted to the next grade or not. I have never been, and I've been doing this work 7 years professionally. I have never been part of an IEP team that did not promote a child because they didn't pass the milestone.
Okay. Okay.
I can't tell you it wouldn't happen if they were, particularly if they were being retaliatory because you pulled her off of the GAA. I can't swear and promise you it won't happen, but I have never seen it happen.
Okay. Thanks.
Right? As long, basically, if they're going to say they're not going to promote her, they're basically going to be having to say, we didn't teach her this year.
Right.
In which case, you're going to be going back and asking for compensatory services.
Right. And the sad part about it is, since this is her first year in middle school, I've already checked out the school, and I'm already saying that that's what I'm gonna have to do because of their rep. So, you know.
Well, I will say, I'm going to say one caveat. Well, I'm going to actually say two. First of all, the state of special education, the state of education in this nation right now is at it's never been worse. The state of Georgia and the metro Atlanta area have more vacancies than they know what to do with. Our kids are not going to be educated this year the way that they should be, and it's going to be problematic. And with all of that said, though, I always encourage the families that I work with to take each school year, regardless of what the reputation is, and with not that they don't need to be watching very carefully what's happening, but to give it the shadow of the doubt, right? I have been in really terrible schools where there is a shining light of a teacher who has made all of the difference in that group of children's lives for that year. So reputations happen, staff moves in, staff moves out over the course of the school, over the course of the summer. Go in with a positive attitude about what it could be, and then keep your eyes and ears open.
Okay, I'll try that.
That it is a hard thing to do. But not every teacher, even in a school that has a reputation, is bad. And you just might get some luck out. And I have had kids in great schools with great reputations who have had a bad year because of a bad teacher. And I've had kids in schools that everybody is clamoring to get out of, and they luck out for a year.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Okay, I am only going to go through some of this transition planning lightly because your kids are so young, but there are a few things that I want to look at, particularly because it's important to talk about even at your kids' ages. So, am I still on share?
Yes.
Okay, I still have share, but now I don't have it up. Hold on. Give me 1 minute. I'm having some difficulty. It doesn't want to play nicely with me now. All right, I am back up.
I wish I could help, but
I am stuck. Hold on a minute. I don't know why I'm stuck, but I am stuck and it's not wanting to let me out. Okay, let's try this again. Well, you guys might get my screen for a minute. There we go. Can you guys see it okay again? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Cheryl, are you with me? Can you see the screen?
as she's going to give me the slides, and then we will be sending them out. Nadia.
Yep. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And yes, we can see it.
All right, perfect. All right, transition planning. I love this. Is what it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be the 3 F's. It shouldn't be your kids going into food service, your kids going into filth service, meaning housekeeping, or your kids going into flowers, which means working at a bouquet place, right? Transition planning is probably the most important time in a student's IEP life. Yet this is the section of the IEP that I consistently see inadequate or downright botched most of the time. It is an afterthought in the schools. They don't know what to do or how to do it well for the most part. Right? Just like every other part of the IEP, transition planning should be based on assessments and evaluations, right? And then the team should come back together to talk about what adult life will look like for the child and create a plan that helps them get there, right? Just so the transition section, all of you have skipped over in IEP groups, IEP meetings, because you don't start writing a transition plan in the state of Georgia. IDEA says at the very latest 16 in the state of Georgia, we do it at 14. That does not mean that you can't be talking about transition even prior to that. But once you're coming up that 8th grade year, or if you have decided along the way to pull your kid back, I want to talk about that for a minute in a second. If you're coming up on 8th grade, generally that's the grade that the first transition plan is written, when your child is turning in the IEP plan in which your child is going to turn 14. Now, I just want to make a quick comment about holding your kids back. I know that there's lots of people who are afraid of who hold their kids back in kindergarten because maturity wise, they're just not ready to move on. I'm okay with that if that's a decision you feel like you need to make, particularly if your child has a late spring or summer birthday. I know a lot of people who choose to do it again in 5th grade, to hold your kid back. You're afraid of that move to middle school. You're afraid of the hormones that are going to be running. Your kid might be physically smaller. The danger of that, and I just want you to keep this filed away somewhere, for those of you who are not quite there yet and might get there. Your child is going to want and need as many years as they can have on the backside of their education for this transition planning. The more time they can get working on life skills, job skills, independent living skills, when they are 18, 19, 20, 21, if you hold your child back in kindergarten, you hold your child back in 5th grade, you hold your child back in 8th grade, they're then going to hit 12th grade at 20 or 21. That's not leaving you a whole lot of time to do that last piece, which is the transition planning and having them work outside of the school system to work on how to get around, to work on how to hold a job and job coaching. So just think about that as that urge to, I've gotten comfortable in my elementary school. I'm not ready to make that middle school transition.
So Kim's comment was, if only the schools did a better job with 19 to 22.
I know.
Which is a true statement.
It is a true statement. But there are places that we can push our schools to bring in people from Georgia Vocational Rehab, to bring in people from Bobby Dodd to come in and talk about, and a variety of other resources, to talk about what other resources are out there and how do we get our kids connected. So when you get my slide, I'm going to encourage you to print this page on transition services when you head into your first IEP meeting that you discuss transitions. This is right out of the IDEA regulations, right? And it is the definition of what transition services are. And to your point, it speaks to who should be in the room and what should be planned, right? Transition services mean a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that, one, is designed to be within a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child with a disability. Do not let them write only academic goals on your child's transition plan. It should also address functional goals, right? If your child can't read a map and they're going to be able, your child is independent enough, or you're hoping your child is going to be independent enough to manage public transportation, they're going to need to know how to read that MARTA map. That's a skill they should be learning in school. This transition should facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities, including post-secondary education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. The transition plan is based on the individual child's need, taking into account their strengths, their preferences, and their interests. Includes instruction, related services, community experiences, the development of employment or other post-school adult living objectives, and if appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills, and provision of functional a functional vocational rehab evaluation. Transition services for children with disabilities may be special education if provided as specially designed instruction or a related service if required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education. Take that in with you. When they start saying, we don't have to bring in people from the outside, all you have to do is say, that's not what the regulations say.
And I also want to add that I think, because I've started speaking to parents who have 18-year-olds now and 17-year-olds that did the years of COVID and never have it, they don't have transition plans.
Not whatsoever.
And so I think that that's going to be a really critical thing for y'all to be aware of and what's coming up. So I just wanted to say that out loud, that COVID has not been our friend necessarily.
So here you are with kindergartners, second graders, third graders, even a rising sixth grader. What can you do now? The biggest thing that I want to encourage you to do today, tomorrow, this week, before school starts back in 2 or 3 weeks, depending on your county, is to write a vision statement if you have not already done so. There are templates all over the place on the computer. If you don't know how to write one, you can email me. I will send you a template. But a vision statement is a description of what you and your child, your student, if they're able to tell you, it may just be you at this stage because your children are so young, what they hope to do after completing their high school years. Do they plan to go on to a college? Do they plan to go on to a supportive college experience? Do they plan to live independently? Do they plan to have a job? Where is it? What is the long-term goal, right, of where you want your child to be when they finish their public school experience? And you bring that in on get a plastic, lucite stand, and you bring that with you to every IEP meeting and stick it in the middle of the table. So when they're on the goal for the third time that your child is going to identify coins, when we work in a world that works on debit cards and swiping, how is that getting your child to where they need to be? Do our kids really need to be counting money? Yes, they need to be able to round up. They need to be able to recognize if their grocery bill is, they've gone to the grocery store, they've gone to order lunch, and lunch is $9.26, they need to be able to identify to hand them $10, right? Sorry about that. My computer seems to be very sensitive today. When everyone on your team understands your aspirations for your child or your child's aspirations, they will be able to write better goals to help your child achieve their goals or your vision, right? Don't just write a brief statement that I hope my son will graduate with a real diploma from high school, right? You want to be specific, right, in the skills and the goals and what they want to do. And as I started saying, this is something you can do now. I have every single one of my clients write a vision statement when I get started with them. It changes. Absolutely. I tweak in the past 4 years, I have tweaked my son's vision statement every year. Right? In 8th grade, he wasn't going to college and he could still barely read. In 9th grade, he was thinking about a trade school. In 10th grade, maybe I'll go to a 2-year college. By last year, he was reading full books. He's writing. Math is still not his best subject, but he's coming home. He's traveling in Europe on his own this summer, and he is coming home tomorrow and sitting down to write college applications. Every year, in the last 4 years, his vision statement has changed based on what he wants for himself, not what I want for him. Now, yes, I recognize I'm talking about a child who doesn't have an intellectual disability, but even your children who have intellectual disabilities have wants and desires. We may have to help them, right, bite into it in a manageable way. But we need to listen to what they want and what they want after high school, and then be talking about how do we help them achieve that on some level. How's my time?
It is, you're at 9:20.
Okay.
And I just also want to say that before you start this, we're happy to bring you back.
Well, I may come back to talk more about transitions, but start early, right? Make sure, write that vision statement, get that idea of where you want your kid to be. Start asking those questions, right? GAA versus milestone. Do I think my child is going to be capable, perhaps with a lot of support, to pass those EOCTs, end of course tests, in those 4 subjects, so that my kid can graduate with a certified diploma? Am I going to keep my kid on the milestone track until 8th grade? Now, here's the piece, right? You need to make that decision in 8th grade, whether you're going to keep them on the milestone track in high school, or whether you're going to go the GAA track when they get to high school, because you do need to take the GAA in 8th grade if you're going to go for that state alternative diploma. They have to take the GAA once in middle school, and then again in 11th grade in high school, right? I talked a little bit about self-determination, right? It's important for your child to begin to talk about what is important to them. And it could be something as simple as, I don't always want to be dependent on my mom and dad to drive me places, right? Does it mean your child is going to go out and get a driver's license for themselves? For some students, that may be reasonable. But for other students, it may be that we have to teach them how to call the disability MARTA bus, right? Or that we have to teach them how to take the regular bus route. But you want to begin in, at least by middle school, to start talking to your child about who do they want to be, and letting them have some input on this transition plan, right? We want to focus on strengths. We do a lot of times, and we do a lot of focus on IEP meetings and what our kids can't do. A transition plan is all about what our kids can do, right? Make sure as you get towards transition that your IEP team knows what agencies you want to be involved in the process. They do have access. They may tell you they don't. You want to make sure you understand that adult services are often eligibility based, and there are long waiting lists. Cheryl, I see you laughing up there.
It's not, I mean, it's waiting list. The first waiting list is to get, the Medicaid waiver.
Yep.
let alone the dramatic waiting list, and they all have them.
Transition plans can include all areas of transition. We talked about that, right? It's functional needs, it's academic needs, it's work needs, it's independent living needs. Keep an open mind and learn what's possible, right? The other thing you need to recognize about IEP transition plans is they're not all done by the school. Parents have responsibility for those plans. Community has responsibility for parts of those plans. Not every part of the IEP goals for the transition plan are done within the walls of the school. And personal experience is best for students to determine their strengths and interest areas. That means you need to make sure that your students are in a community program, are doing internships, have jobs, or volunteering. They need to roll up their sleeves and get experience just like neurotypical kids to figure out what is it that I'm good at and what is it that I'm interested in. Finally, right, I love this quote. The last day of school should look like the first day of the rest of their lives, right? The day after their last day of school, the little yellow bus is not going to be coming up their driveway to pick them up. So there better be more than a transition plan on paper, but a transition plan that has truly helped to create the rest of their life, so that the last day of school is truly the first day of the rest of their lives. Questions?
Apparently, I will start again. I actually don't have a question. I just have a remark. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much. The information you gave is incredible. And the sad part is that what you told me tonight is 100% opposite of what I was explained the GAA means for my son. So I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, the school system likes to say that it is all about making it easier for your child. It's all of the tests, both the milestone and the GAA, are all about meeting state regulations of proving that they're teaching our kids.
Right. So the way that they explained it to me was that this is gonna, if he goes on GAA, it will enable them to make accommodations on a daily basis. They didn't phrase it as a different test versus the milestones test. So that's where the biggest difference comes in. Fun times. I appreciate you. Thank you.
You can go to that, you can call a meeting at the beginning of the year and say, you know, I've done some research on the GAA and I have a lot more questions for you.
Oh, it will be coming. Thank you.
She's not shy. Okay. Anybody else with questions? Stephanie, do you have any questions?
Listen, the last page, I didn't push it up there, but the last page has my email address, my website, my phone number. If you have a specific question with regard to tonight's presentation, feel free to call me. If you have questions about something else and you want to schedule a consultation, I'm happy to do that as well. We'll talk about my fees at some other time, but you know, information is power. So I'm glad that you were on. I'm glad that you asked questions, and I hope that I was coherent.
You did an amazing job as always. And you take something that's pretty complicated and you made it sound much simpler.